Welcome back. This is the continuation of the preceding video for Phonetics 2 on how we're going to go about finishing up our semester and secondary stress. Moving on to, so our last sort of, this is going to be a sort of a exclusively, this video will be exclusively on intonation, right? It's sort of a, think of it being sort of a supplement to what we've seen before. Because we have already seen intonation, right? We have seen it sort of in, I would say, sort of simple utterances, right? Utterances that only have one tone unit. Maybe I'll just refresh our memories with that, right? Okay. I can say, I went shopping, right? Okay. And by the way, what I'm looking at is something that we have seen. We've seen this before, and this will be on page 21 in the brochure, right? So we'll take your time to turn to 21. You can obviously turn up the video. So when we have when we're indicating intonation, we notice this is the simple utterance. There's only, which means we're only going to have what we call one tone unit, and we indicate these with two lines, right? Tone units very often correspond with short sentences, or they can correspond with clauses. Sometimes they can correspond with the positives, but it's sort of sometimes big grammatical units. Basically, I don't want to get too bogged down in that detail, right? But that's where you take a pause. I went shopping. You're going to sort of take a pause here, right? And that's where you take a breath. We call it unité de souffle. Okay. And this is also where you give the listener the time to sort of apprehend what you have stated, and the listener can then sort of compute that and says, "Ooh, this is a sort of a sentence." And sometimes people think of sentences as something that has one meaning, right? So you're going to sort of just sort of synthesize these words and sort of ascribe meaning to them, right? So that's sort of how we break up the spoken chain, right? Usually punctuation is a pretty good indicator for tone units, because things like commas, right? Things like periods, things like semicolons or colons, right? Or dashes, right? These things are going to indicate that the speaker is taking a breath, and they divide the spoken chain into units, right? And we're going to call these tone units, right? Fine. So here we have a tone unit because we have a simple sentence. I have a period here, right? So, or a full stop, I would say if I was British. I went shopping. So the question is, the pitch, the speaker, when you speak, I went shopping, banana, right? Something happens here. Now the thing, we're not going to go into great detail, but we are probably aware of the fact that we have a non-stressed syllable. This is our personal pronoun. It's a grammatical word. Here we have a lexical verb. It is going to be stressed, one syllable lexical word. Then we have another lexical verb, shopping, right? Okay. So here we have ing, which is a neutral suffix. It will not be stressed. Then we have our monosyllabic lexical root, and that will be stressed. So I went shopping, right? I went shopping. Great. So what happens is we kind of ask ourselves where this pitch change occurs, because if I can say I went shopping. If I only listen to the pitch, it's a musical line, meaning pitch was like frequency, right? Okay, so I can sort of represent that sort of in a very loose way. I went shopping, right? So you can hear that it kind of changes there. And actually you can hear that it kind of falls. So we're going to indicate falling intonation, right? By just, and the only thing you would indicate would just be a dash on the final stressed syllable in the tone unit, right? We notice that is typically, right? There can be exceptions to this, but I would say, let's just say a normal utterance, right? One where we're not really focusing on a particular element. It will be the final stressed syllable where the pitch change occurs. And we call this the nucleus. And we've seen this before, right? We're going to call this the nucleus. And that's it. And notice here we're saying that we have we're stating that the pitch is falling, and the falling intonation, falling intonation, means that we're dealing with, I can call that an assertion, sort of a factual statement. That means the speaker, notice the pitch goes up and it comes down again, right? The fact that it comes down again means we have this idea of sort of completeness. We've come full circle. The speaker is saying that he or she is done with this utterance, right? Okay? There's nothing more. The speaker is not asking, right, the person that he or she is speaking to validate it, right? We are just, the speaker is saying, I consider this to be true, right? And that is what the falling intonation indicates. That is the information contained in the pitch. You can hear that it falls. I went shopping, right? You hear it falling. The listener says, "Okay, that's a true statement," right? So and that's what I mean when I say assertion. Okay. On the other hand, right? We could if we have, let's say we have a question mark here, right? Okay. The speaker would then be, let's say the speaker wasn't really sure about what he or she did on the preceding day, right? And the speaker would say, "Wait, yeah, what did I? I went to the gym. No, I went shopping. I went shopping." And here we can hear that the speaker, instead of coming full circle and saying, "I'm done with this statement, I'm telling you it's true, we don't need to come back to it anymore." Here we notice we're kind of suspended, right? We go up and we don't come down. It's sort of like we throw an apple in the air and it's stuck in the air, right? It's not over yet. So this idea of being sort of suspended up here, right? Really, that indicates, that is the speaker's way of indicating that he or she doesn't know if this is true or not, and he or she is asking the person he or she is speaking to validate that assertion, right? Okay, that's what a question is. You say, I went shopping, and you notice that means that we are going to have rising intonation, which means we're not done, right? And so the speaker is sort of asking the person that he or she is speaking to sort of complete the utterance in a sense. I went shopping? Yes, you did. You get it? I went shopping? Yes, you did. And the answer, of course, positive or negative, will be to complete the assertion and validate or not that utterance. Okay, so that is sort of the second case. So once again, the place of the nucleus is going to be the same in a typical utterance. It will be on our final stress syllable in the tone unit, right? But when it's a question, right, when the speaker asks the co-enunciator, if you were, co-utterer, I should say, co-enunciateur is French, the co-utterer, to validate that assertion, there will be rising intonation. And this is how we indicate it. That's all you need to do, right? You need to just identify the final stress syllable and then just have that sort of rising line. You've done your job there, right? Okay, that's what you will have indicated, that here we have rising intonation, and it's important that it occurs. Notice it occurs on a syllable. It doesn't occur over the word. The nucleus is just one syllable, right? Even though that syllable might occur in a polysyllabic word, right? Shopping is two syllables, but the nucleus is only that one. Okay. All right, that's it. So now let's move along to sort of now that's what we saw in 21. Now we might think we did this backwards. I prefer starting with that. That little lesson. That was on page 21. We have seen that before. I think it's easier to start with that. I mean, because that's where we sort of really explain what's going on. And now if we go back to page 11, we can see sort of another use of intonation. And this will be, where is it? Here it is. On page 11, Introduction to Intonation. And here we have utterance. Here we have some statements involving question tags. And in question tags, there are some question tags indicate that we have a question, and others are more sort of rhetorical. For example, the question tag, it's false to say that it's the real, in today's day and age, that it still is the equivalent of n'est pas in French. N'est pas has become really kind of a snooty thing to say, right? We use question mark tags in English more than n'est pas. But if you're sort of old school French speaker going to say, oui, c'est vrai, n'est-ce pas? Right. And you can say n'est-ce pas in two ways. You can say, ah oui, il a volé le portefeuille, n'est-ce pas? You're asking, is it true, right? Is it not true? Or you can use that more rhetorically, right? Notice you have rising intonation, or you can use that more rhetorically as sort of a filler expression, meaning, and it's sort of like a, I would say, sort of a verbal reflex. You could say, oui, c'est vrai, n'est-ce pas? Right? And n'est-ce pas, I'm not asking a question, I'm sort of adding a rhetorical tag, right, to my utterance. And that is true in English too. We sometimes we just sort of add this as sort of a filler, right? And that's a little bit more rhetorical, or we're actually asking a question. And of course, when we're asking a question, it's going to be rising, and otherwise it'll be falling. So let's just look at the first two examples on page 11. We'd have, she should apologize, shouldn't she? I'm writing this. That's no. An important thing to notice here is that once again, punctuation can help us, right? Notice I have no question. Well, I don't know. I didn't write a question mark here. Well, I say of expecting agreement, but here we have two. No, we've separated this in. We have our little tone unit boundaries, right? These are the boundaries of the tone. We have two tone units. This is the first one and the second one, right? So she should apologize. So we said she should. Now should, I would say, that's going to be your root. Don't get too worried about this. I would not, because it's a root modal, I would not stress that. Apologize. Apologize, right? Okay. So notice that is our last stressed syllable. So that will be, of course, falling. That is our last stressed syllable in our tone unit. That will be falling. She should apologize. So that's a nucleus. Nucleus only involves one syllable, that final stressed syllable in the tone unit. Now our second tone unit is just going to be a question tag, right? Okay. So shouldn't she, right? I would say shouldn't, because it's a two-syllable word. We need to have a stress. I would say that wouldn't even be shouldn't she, right? That's a grammatical word. So here, since the speaker is sort of not really asking a question, is rhetorical, there will be a falling intonation, right? Okay. And that's what's indicated. Notice we have expecting agreement, right? But if the speaker was actually asking a real question, shouldn't she? And let's say the speaker is not really sure of the answer themselves, they are going to, if they're really asking a question, that will be rising intonation. So that's really all you need to know for this, right? So that's this idea of just basically becoming more aware of sort of the power of this idea of rising and falling intonation, sort of the meaning. We sometimes you might be sort of mistakenly fooled, or you might mistakenly fool yourself into thinking that sort of the meaning is only in the words, right? But notice here the meaning depends on sort of the pitch. It depends on the intonation, right? With that rising intonation, we're asking a question, but the very same words, right, spoken with a different intonative pattern, right, will have a different meaning. In one case, we're making an assertion, and we just have sort of a rhetorical tag, right? If we have falling intonation, if we have rising intonation, that question tag serves to ask a question, ask the co-auditor to confirm the utterance. Okay. Now the final thing we have, and I'm just going to call your attention to this. This is not really something I can sort of test you on, but this is sort of a interesting thing I would say to be aware of. Here we have on page 4. We have page 14. We have intonation. Here we have low key utterances. Now here we have what I think we might call. These are things that you may have already seen if you're familiar with what we call sort of appositives very often. very often when we have a positives, or if we have a non-restrictive relative clauses or non-defining relative clauses, meaning a non-defining relative or a positive, right, is going to give sort of extra information that isn't necessary to identify what we're talking about. So because it's not necessary, right, we can think of it as being parenthetical. And parenthetical is a good expression to help you understand this, because parenthetical refers to the kind of punctuation you're going to use to refer to this, but we can also use sort of commas, and sometimes we can use dashes, right? Okay. Notice, let's say on page 14, here we are with intonation low key. We're at the top of our page. Exercise 1. Let's look at that first sentence. Notice I could have punctuated this differently, right? In France, where privacy is sacred, the presto. So notice there's something kind of parenthetical. It's sort of like an aside, like as we say in French, an aparté, right? We get the feeling that the speaker kind of changes his or her register and sort of has this sort of side statement, right? That isn't essential, right? To really understand the meaning of the sentence. It's sort of that's what we would call this an aside, right? So there is, and it's noticed. It's important to note that there's a dip in intonation here. Now I'm not going to test you on this, right? But this might help. Just be aware of this. And by the way, this is what we call a non-restrictive relative. In France, where privacy is sacred, isn't necessary. France, by the way, as we all know, what France is. We don't need a relative where privacy is sacred to help us identify what it is. So that means it's sort of just extra information, right? Okay, which means, and when we have a relative that gives extra information, we call that a non-defining, right, or a non-restrictive. They're two ways that we can call it relative, right? And that's what we have here. And notice that means that we sort of have this, hiatus. We have a sort of a pause in the middle. This is, by the way, a long noun phrase. In France, where privacy is sacred, right? We have a sort of a pause in the noun phrase. In France, where privacy is sacred, and notice you're going to have sort of a dip in your voice. So it's sort of interesting, sort of, I would say, for tonal control. It's nice to be able to do that. And by the way, I could replace these commas with parentheses. In France, parentheses where privacy is sacred, or with dashes, right? Not hyphens, right? But dashes, the longer. I would say, je crois que c'est 8 sur le clavier, ou 6, je ne sais pas, je n'ai pas le même clavier que beaucoup d'entre vous. Mais I think you understand what I mean. Good. So that's sort of to get yourself used to that. And this is also true. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this. This is also true when we have narrators, right? Giving direct reported speech, right? When we have this sort of the sort of commentary of the narrator to sort of say who, let's say, give indications of who said what, right? There will be sort of a dip in intonation. I have no idea what you're talking about, Pauline answered. So we have this sort of shift, right? A dip in level, right? Which is very similar to what's going on here with our, either our positives or our non-restrictive relatives. Okay, so I hope that's useful to you. It's once again, this shows the importance to really be able to be poised when you're speaking, to be able to make pauses, because this is a really important part of expressing yourself. It's kind of difficult to practice it. I would say try getting your ear attuned to this, and I would encourage you to think about this kind of thing when you are going to express yourself in 2 weeks' time, because that you are going to record yourself speaking, right? So I would say sort of take liberties, kind of try to allow yourself to loose up, right? That's kind of the paradoxical advice. If you want to get everything perfect and right, sometimes it can kind of mess you up. But say, no, I can take your time to express yourself. Make sure, think, pauses. That's part of actual speaking. You're thinking of the words or the full part, but allow those sort of spaces to come into play, right? You sometimes can express yourself in silence, right? That might sound a little bit over the top to say that, but some silences are more pregnant than others, right? And that it's important for I would say for you having a sort of a natural, sort of acquiring that sort of natural rhythm in English, and it can really make your expressive capability, it can make it a lot more powerful. So thank you for listening. As I've said, all the information about what is expected of you will be included in the email. So good luck with the end of the semester, and take care.